Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Fantasy Pivot on rotocurve.com, a show that's, of course, aimed to teach you guys how to play the game of daily fantasy basketball from me and then a group of three experts. Today's show is going to be an interesting one. We got a big slate tonight, but before we get there, Josh, do we have a free roll this week? I don't have notes for that. Is there a free roll, and if so, can you tell them how to get there?
Yes, there is. We have a $500 free roll for NBA again this Friday up on rotocurve.com. The banner is up basically all over the site, but if you wanted a direct link, go to rotocurve.com/free roll. We had a big one last week for PGA. We've had some big ones the past few weeks before that in NBA, so I'm excited to get that free roll back for NBA this Friday. So make sure to reserve that now.
There you go. You, of course, can find the NBA tools on rotocurve.com. At the top, literally says NBA tools. There's PGA tools, too. I know the golf writer Josh Gross is very excited for PGA this week. It sounds like a lot of people are, and we're getting close to the Masters, so you should get on your golf stuff before it's too late, because, of course, everyone wants to do the Masters. That's the only time you'll catch me watching golf. But beyond that, let's introduce the rest of the guys on the show. Nick Mensio. Nick, was there some kind of memo today that everyone's wearing hats and I'm the only hatless one? Did I forget to get that? And not only is everyone wearing one, but they're backwards.
I think that's a memo every day we do a show, man.
That is true. I am the only one who seems to go all natural. Maybe it's because you all have receding hairlines. We'll never know since you guys never do not wear hats.
I got good hair.
Benny, are you going to take off your hat and show us that, or is yours really a cover-up?
No, mine's a cover-up. I have a receding hairline.
There you go. We got me, we got Nick, and we got two LeBron Jameses on the staff here. But let's get into the slate tonight because it's interesting. I mean, this Warriors-Timberwolves game, like, holy crap, 233 over-under is what it's at right now. I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of games, and again, there's a lot of high-scoring games, kind of like the last time. But, Josh, don't we have to focus on this kind of by default? Or is it a great strategy to maybe not use it too heavily in tournaments just in case Golden State does blow them out, even though they're on the road?
Well, this is definitely a game to target, and each day on RotoCurve I update the Vegas lines on what is called our Games to Target tool, and they are tops of the tool right now, plus 3.2 rating, which is very good. But they're tied with Sacramento and Chicago, so I do think that's a game that I think all of us will be targeting as well. So I don't think this is a game that you have to have a ton of guys from, that Golden State-Minnesota game, but honestly, that total of 232 is just too big to ignore.
Now, Nick, we'll get into the individual plays, but just from a theory standpoint, do you like that game better, or do you like that Bulls-Kings game? I mean, which is going to be your focus, or maybe it's a different game entirely?
I like that Bulls-Kings game better. I think both teams play defense. So, I mean, it's hard to pick Warriors from that game because they're all expensive, and then it's hard to pick T-Wolves because you don't know which guy's going to go off because the Warriors play such great defense. In the other game, I just don't have to worry about much defense. I love Boogie, I love Rose, I love Butler. I mean, I think that's easier to game to target, and they're all cheaper too.
Yeah, and Benny, we were talking before the show about what we think the rotations are going to look like in this one because, of course, that's always important. But even before we get into the positions, let's just discuss that Timberwolves-Warriors game. And, I mean, just go into what you think the difference is going to be because, like last game, the Warriors, they played the Spurs, and both teams basically ditched their big men. You know, there was no Maurice Spates or Hardley. There was Tim Duncan for 8 minutes. That can't be what today's game is like, right? This is going to be something completely different.
Well, like you and I were talking about beforehand, we're not really sure how the matchups are going to go here because basically if Bogut is out and Ezeli's already out for them, you know, they have Varejao, they have McAdoo, and they have Mo Spates, who are all going to be guys that play at least a few minutes today. But if they're going to go small a little more often, it's going to be tough for Minnesota to match up by going with Karl Anthony Towns and, you know, Gorgie Jang, who is the way that they like to play and the way that they usually go. I think it's definitely going to mean a few less minutes for Jang, but I also think it might mean a few less minutes for Towns there. You know, so I think it's going to be tough because you really can't match up with two big guys going up against that, you know, Golden State like Brandon Rush starting along with Harrison Barnes at the 2 forward spots, and then Clay and Steph and Draymond in the middle. So I think there's going to be a lot of cat and mouse going on there, and I think what really hurts Minnesota is the fact that if you're going to pay up for, Jang, or you're going to pay up for Towns, there's definitely a chance they may see a few less minutes tonight than they normally do, because when Golden State goes small, one of those two is going to have to come out of the game.
I agree with you. Josh, let's start getting into the slate tonight, and let's before we even do, let's start with what I think is the biggest injury news of the night, or at least the ones that we're hanging on, is that Kevin Love has an illness or a back injury, depending on who you listen to. It sounds like he may have a little of both, or maybe they're just excuses for him possibly sitting out tonight. But at the point guard position, if Love sits out, don't we have to look to Kyrie Irving, who floats around 35% usage without Love, which is a huge kick up from his 27. I mean, isn't that the first name we have to drop if, in fact, he is out? And who else do you like at the point guard position?
Kyrie's definitely interesting tonight because, like you said, that usage definitely creeps up. And when the Cavs run the floor, a lot of their game is based on outlet passes from Kevin Love. So with Love out of the game there, I think that brings the ball into Kyrie and LeBron James's hands a little bit more coming up the floor, which could change the flow of the game. But I do think that Kyrie definitely has a chance to get more fantasy points, not only just shooting, which we know he loves to do, but assists as well. So he's somebody I'm looking at, especially against Denver tonight. Also, I think the guy that I'm paying up for, especially on FanDuel, is Steph Curry, and I'll talk about why. It pains me because this is the first show I think we've ever had where I haven't mentioned John Wall, right? I mean, it's got to be. But for just $300 more, you can get Steph Curry on FanDuel. So I think that's something to take a look at because Curry has an excellent matchup, of course, against the Minnesota Timberwolves. We talked about that game, and we will talk about that game. And in addition, he's coming off a terrible game against San Antonio, so his shot's not going to be nearly as bad. And usually in a good matchup, that translates to good things. And, of course, we all know about the Warriors on the road. They tend to score more points because those starters stay in the game more because I don't want to say they're bad on the road, but they're definitely not as good, meaning that they have a chance to play into the fourth quarter. And whenever Steph gets a chance to play into the fourth, I'm definitely looking at him for my lineups.
Yep, I'm going to have to agree with you. I saw someone tweet out something about Ricky Rubio's defensive box plus minus and why that may be something to avoid, but I'm looking at Basketball Reference. He's sort of in the middle there. I mean, Minnesota's been middle of the pack. It's going to be hard to avoid at least some Warriors, and especially Steph Curry. I think he's a guy you got to have some exposure to in tournaments after, 46 real points the last time they faced off. Nick, I know you like to go stars. Is this the position to do it tonight?
Yeah, I'm really struggling between paying up for Boogie or Curry or just trying to jam both into my lineup. But Curry's price has come down. He's on the road, like Collacchi said. It's really tough to fade him in this spot. I mean, defense is a concern a little bit, but I mean, this is the MVP of the league we're talking about. I'm not too worried about Rubio stopping him. So I think I'm locking in Kyrie Irving, and then I'm just figure out if I want to pay up for Curry with him or go down to George Hill, because I also like George Hill a lot, even in a potential blowout for the Pacers. But I think he's just too cheap. It's a great matchup, and it's going to be your super up-paced game. If the Sixers can hang in there, I just think Hill has a great chance of mean value.
Yeah, Benny, are you kind of sticking with the same strategy? Let's stick with cash first, and then maybe give us some of your tournament options at a point guard, because I think mine are a little different. I mean, I like some of those names, but I like a few others as well. Let's go with you first, though.
Yeah, there's a couple other guys I'm looking at, too, that haven't been mentioned. I really like Derrick Rose in that matchup against Sacramento tonight.
Yep.
His price is really cheap all over the place. I don't think that Jimmy Butler is 100% back to the guy who's playing 38 to 40 minutes yet. So I think they're still kind of holding it back on him. And if Pau Gasol is out again, for Rose to step up. The other thing, too, is they're playing Sacramento. And we know that, Boogie Cousins especially is lazy on the defensive end. And Chicago runs a lot of the high pick and roll stuff where the ball is in Derrick Rose's hand. So if Rondo's going to be getting hit by screens, and the big guys are just going to kind of give, it's a game that Rose is going to be able to get to the basket quite a bit and either, make shots for himself or create for his teammates. So at only $5,800 on DraftKings, I think he's cheap. I think he's only around like $6K over on FanDuel as well. I just think he's a little bit too cheap for the matchup. And it's Sacramento, so it's going to be a high-pay matchup. It's going to be up and down. You know, they are missing a couple guys. I think Etuan Moore's out. Pretty sure Heinrich's out too. So they're a little thin in the backcourt as well. So I expect them to play a lot of minutes. Think Derrick Rose will be good. You know, I like a lot of the guys that people are talking about. If Love is out, I really, really like Kyrie tonight. You know, I will have a lot of exposure to him. But even a guy like Isaiah Thomas, you know, with Jay Crowder out and Smart and Evan Turner splitting time at the small forward spot, we've seen a few more minutes out of guys like Isaiah Thomas, two guys that I just mentioned. They're all playing and seeing a little more court time. So Isaiah Thomas has been putting up some good numbers. I'd be careful about using him where he's a little bit too expensive. Some sites he's getting really priced up, but I could see a 40-point game coming out of him today. So those are some other guys that weren't mentioned that you know, I still have on my radar too.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on Derrick Rose. There's a guy who's eclipsed 31 fantasy points in 5 of his last 7 games. And as you mentioned, you know, people kind of worried about Jimmy Butler. He hasn't played more than 34 minutes a game this month. And when you roster Butler, the thing you're looking for is those minutes, right? Because the difference between 34 and his league-leading, you know, 37 or 38, if we're assuming even just a fantasy point per minute, you know, that could be as much as 5 fantasy points differential. And that's enough, you know, to hit value or fall just short. So I think, you know, the matchup awesome. People are going to look there, but Rose is priced significantly less. You know, Sacramento obviously struggles to cover opposing point guards, so I really like Derrick Rose. I think he's a great fit on both Fantasy Draft and DraftKings. He's a little bit higher on FanDuel, so I'd have to think twice there. But how about Ray McCallum against probably the worst backcourt defense? I mean, it's pretty clear, considering they didn't re-up Briante Weber's contract, that he's the guy. I mean, he played 35 minutes last game, and he looked pretty good. You know, Lance Stevenson had been the everyday, or basically the main ball handler, and he kind of made a case for himself. Now, I know they signed Jordan Farmar, who might be a better player than he is. Well, we'll have to see about that. But I think McCallum, who's basically at the minimum, you know, playing 35 minutes against a defense is terrible like this, you know, even if he comes around 30, he should crush value pretty easily, even though he's not a great player. So I kind of like him for cash in pretty much all formats. And I know we haven't really talked about him yet. Because I like McCallum, I'm not as sold on it, but I think Sean Livingston's pretty viable in this one. Without Iguodala, he kind of takes some of that minutes. You know, Iguodala actually acts as a backup point guard sometimes, or at least a co-ball handler with Livingston. And you look at their minutes without Ezeli and Iguodala, I mean, his minutes go up by almost a minute per game, and his fantasy points go up. He just takes on a slightly bigger role. So I think Livingston in a game with 233 is definitely viable. And then Brandon Knight. I think it's going to be a battle of no defense pretty much between the Grizzlies and the Suns. I know no one's really talking about it, but I do think that game is going to be pretty conducive for fantasy, considering there's a lot of lower prices and there's a lot of pretty miserable defense. I mean, the Grizzlies are, I think, bottom 5 in overall defensive efficiency since they've been without Marc Gasol and Conley. So it's a whole different team. You know, you're not looking at that slow-paced, boring style. It's against the Suns. I think it should be a pretty fair matchup. Josh, do you want to add anything to the point guard situation? Maybe tournament only, or have we pretty much covered it all?
Well, one guy I did want to add to was Nick mentioned George Hill, who I also love as well tonight. Of course, we know about the Sixers' DVP against point guards. It's been a lot better than you would think. But this month, in the month of March, they had just been dreadful against point guards. I mean, we're looking at, these are DraftKings points per game in March. 36, 40, 47, 30, 48. We have 3 games of 46, 57, and 63. Now, some of those games were John Wall, some of those games were Russell Westbrook, but some of those games were Patrick Beverley and Donald Sloan, too. So they have just been dreadful against the position. And one thing we do know about George Hill, he plays a ton of minutes, unless the Pacers are, of course, up by 30, which could very well happen. But I do like George Hill tonight because of that low price, because of how many minutes he plays, and, of course, because of that matchup. Now, the other guy I had mentioned here was just a GPP-only play, and that's Reggie Jackson. When you look at the home and away splits, a lot of guys have very similar numbers. Jackson is not one of those guys. It's nearly a 7-point difference between home and away, favoring towards home. And the Pistons are home tonight against the Bucks, who have struggled defensively against point guards since Michael Carter-Williams has come out. Now, he's not a good defender, but Bayless is even worse, as Milwaukee's DVP against point guards has actually come down to the bottom third of the NBA. So I think he makes for an excellent tournament play at home. Can't hear you, Ricky.
Can you hear
Ricky's on
me?
mute again.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
No,
yeah,
there
we're good now.
the dreaded mute. Anyways, one guy who I think deserves an honorable mention is Kemba Walker, even though his prices come up. I mean, against San Antonio, you kind of don't want to play anyone. But again, you look at those home-away splits, and if you're going to beat, this team, I think point guard's a good spot to do it. You look at his averages over the last 2 years, it's pretty much been 37 and 37 fantasy points. So, the issue is his price is pretty high right now because he's had such a good scoring, basically season, but definitely since the New Year's turned. He's been such a monster, but I do think he has upside if they compete with San Antonio. The problem is I couldn't do it in cash with all the other great options on the slate. Does anyone have anything else to say at point guard, or
Yeah,
should we move on? Go ahead.
What do we think about? I mean, is there any chance Rose is going to sit? I mean, it's fourth game in 6 nights. I could see him sitting, and then this game starts late too. So on FanDuel, I would be really, really concerned playing him in my lineups, especially at that high price.
Yeah, that's not a bad call. I would say if Pau Gasol suits up, there's probably, if you get that news before, then they probably will ease Rose because then they have at least some other form of offense. I mean, the Bulls are still fighting for a playoff spot. I mean, I think they're the 8th seed at the moment, at least somewhere around there. So, I mean, games still mean something to them. But yeah, I certainly understand what you're saying, and Rose has definitely been a guy to do that before. That's the issue with him.
Also, I think Ray McCallum might be a big trap, especially with Matt Barnes back from suspension. He only played 35 minutes because I think Barnes was out of the rotation, and the 2 games before that he played 16 minutes and 15 minutes. I just think their best lineup they know is Lance Stevenson at the point, Tony Allen, Matt Barnes, Randolph, and JaMychal Green, and then that kind of leaves McCallum out of the picture a little bit, just as like a sub, play 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think the Suns' defense is so miserable that even if he's got a little bit of a scaled back role, that he's still got a chance certainly to succeed. I honestly don't believe he's a trap, but I know what you're saying is, guys are different. And that's kind of why I have Stevenson as a tournament only play, is because, Randolph's back now and Barnes is back, and his price went way up because he was basically their only offensive threat without them. But the thing with McCallum is his price is so low that, he could still have his role scaled back and succeed. With Stevenson, if his role's scaled back at all, you're not getting value.
Yeah, and McCallum got 2 blocks last game. I mean, he's not going to get 2 blocks in either. I mean, that's 4 fantasy points on FanDuel too. I just don't see this guy even being worth playing. But that's your opinion. In my opinion, I just don't think he's a good player tonight.
There you go. Some disagreement on Ray McCallum of all people. Let's let's move on to shooting guard. Shooting guard's interesting tonight. I think this is one where I'm focused on going to that outlier game where I like Andrew Wiggins and I like Klay Thompson because first of all, Klay Thompson's price is way down. I mean, you look at fantasy draft, he's $12,000, so he's the equivalent of a $6,000 player on DraftKings. To me, that's just like the place to use him because I know he's pretty scoring reliant, but in this game, we could pretty much assume there's going to be some scoring from Klay Thompson. And then I think Andrew Wiggins is the safer of the two as you look him versus Levine, because Levine's kind of relied on some pretty solid shooting percentage lately, and the Golden State Warriors are a pretty effective team in terms of limiting opposing. I mean, the pace will be high, so he'll have opportunities, but I doubt he shoots 60-65% against some good defenders. Benny, who do you like at shooting guard tonight?
Yeah, I think I'm a little off the board from everybody else here today, but the 2 guys that I've been looking at right now are actually Bradley Beal and Monta Ellis. Beal was at shoot-around this morning. He's $5,200. Has a good matchup against Atlanta. Atlanta's a good team defense, but one place where they usually struggle is against the shooting guard. A lot of times that's Kyle Korver's man. And Beal is a guy that, his price is low and his minutes are kind of low because he's battling through injuries and he's not playing every day. He's sitting the back half of back-to-backs. But when he's in there, he tends to play 25 to 30 minutes, get 25 to 35 fantasy points. And his price on most of the sites right now is down to like $5K. So he can get your 5 to 6 value at $5K, which I think is pretty good. And I really don't love a lot of the guys that have to pay up for here. But then Monta Ellis is the other guy that I'm looking at. Philly's been pretty bad against shooting guards lately. You know, KCP put up a 35-point game against them. I think he got 25 points out of Garrett Temple. The 44-point, not 44 fantasy point, the actual 44-point Bojan Bogdanovic game was against, Philly a week or two ago. So a lot of shooting guards have been putting up some big numbers against this Philly team right now. You're getting, Isaiah Kanan and Nick Stauskas defense, maybe a little Hollis Thompson depending on how they match up. So I think that's another spot that you can attack. And Monta Ellis has been pretty good. He's been putting up some big numbers here. I think people are going to kind of be off him a little bit because, he's Monta Ellis and also because this is a 15-point spread here. But again, if they're going to win by 15, 16 points, they got to be putting 75, 80 points up on the board in 3 quarters. So I think Monta Ellis is going to be one of the guys that helps them do that.
Yeah, the only reason that I kind of left Beal off my list, and I was just confirming that I read this right, is he's questionable with a pelvis injury. So I think if he plays, he's certainly someone you can shoe in there. I think the matchup for John Wall is pretty difficult. So I would actually was looking at that earlier. Is I like Beal if he's in, and even if he's out, I think one way or the other, I like Otto Porter as well because I think for John Wall, he's still going to get his, but it's going to be a difficult way of going about it against an Atlanta defense that's really stout against opposing point guards. I mean, we saw them shut down D'Angelo Russell not too long ago. They've been shutting down point guards, so you have to figure if it's tougher for John Wall, it's probably going to be easier, or at least he's going to look to feed some of his other teammates, and therefore a guy like Beal or Porter's got to get it done. Nick, who do you like at the shooting guard position tonight?
I like Monta Ellis as well. I like every Pacer starter pretty much. I just think I can't use them all, obviously, and I think I like George Hill and Paul George better. And then I also like Miles Turner and Mahimi down low a lot more too. But I think that's a great call. I also love Klay Thompson. I agree with you in that one. I just think he's a guy on FanDuel who just never hits value or just crushes value. There's like no in between, especially because he's a little more expensive on that side, 7,000. But both him and Lance Stevenson are 7,000. I think I'd rather go Klay Thompson on at that price. But I also love Lance Stevenson, like I was talking about. I think he's going to run the point over McCallum tonight. So I think he's one of their scoring guys, especially I don't think Matt Barnes and Tony Allen are going to score. Michael Green's not much of a scorer. I think it'll come down to Randolph and Stevenson. So I like those two at 7,000. Then coming down a little bit, I like J.R. Smith if Love is out. Obviously gets a huge bump against a terrible team against guards and the Nuggets. And then I also like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope against the Bucks. I just think he's been hitting value every night pretty much. He's great for cash games, so I love those guys.
Yeah, KCP has been one of those guys recently who's been very solid. Him and Tobias Harris. I mean, I love pretty much everyone on that team. They play big minutes, at least the starters, which is why you got to love the Van Gundys of the world, especially over the Skileses and the Jason Kidds and the guys who screw with the rotations. Collacchi, you got a different take on shooting guard tonight, and then I want to go into a couple of guys that I like.
I like KCP as well, but I just saw that Frank Vogel, the coach of the Pacers, just said Ty Lawson is going to be playing 10 to 15 minutes. So to me, that doesn't mean that George Hill is going to be playing that 35, 40 minutes as we saw it. So I think it's safe to downgrade Hill a little bit because the reason why he goes in daily fantasy is because of those minutes. So with those minutes down, I'm not sure he makes for a terrific option. But moving on to shooting guard, I like Caldwell Pope, as I mentioned, but I think a lot of people are just overlooking Jimmy Butler here in cash games because I know his minutes haven't been necessarily what he's used to playing in terms of playing 35, 38, 40. And as Benny said, he may not be fully healthy. But to me, that doesn't matter too much against the Kings because if I played shooting guard, they can just let me score 30 points, and I'm terrible. So it's just looking at a guy like Butler, knowing his role with that offense, especially as Nick said, with Derrick Rose potentially being a candidate to sit. I just want to exploit that matchup in a really fast-paced game because I do think Butler could handle the ball very often. And in a great matchup, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, I want to. This is actually a perfect time to go into it. Is that we talked about the Butler minutes in the opening segment that he hasn't been over 34, but I can still get on board with him in what I think is a pretty solid matchup. But how about Chris Middleton? Like I think if you're considering him tonight, you're crazy because his minutes, and this isn't a good matchup either. I mean, Detroit, seventh, they've allowed the seventh fewest fantasy points to opposing shooting guards and the fourth fewest to opposing small forwards. And Middleton's minutes have been down. You know, he was a guy, him and Butler were basically vying for the league lead in minutes. And now Middleton has been he's played 30 minutes or less in each game this of the last three. So instead of, the 38 minutes, now it's an 8-minute drop off. And that is just, way too big for me to even consider him. I've seen some, projection systems and things like that like him tonight, but also the Bucks, if you've been watching him lately, they've had like the backup unit closing basically. I've seen Rashad Vaughn at the end of the games along with some of the other guys. So I just think Chris Middleton is a very poor option tonight. Usually we talk about the plays, but I think he's an automatic fade for me. And then going into some of the other guys, I think this is a tournament only. We did mention that matchup is a battle of bad defenses between Phoenix and the Grizzlies, but Devin Booker's probably got the hardest individual matchup of them all, assuming that he draws Tony Allen, and he's been the guy kind of eating up the usage lately. But I do still think that without a true rim protector and with the ability to switch off of him, and he's such a great shooter that in a battle where defense is going to come at a premium, he still could go off pretty easily. And again, I mentioned Wiggins. I want to mention Oladipo because pretty much every night, almost regardless of matchup, I know the matchup against Boston isn't great. Another guy who might draw a pretty elite defender in Avery Bradley. But Oladipo, man, the last few, he's been their guy. I mean, even with Peyton back, he still managed, I think it was 37 fantasy points last game. I know he scored 45 real points 2 games ago. So he's the focal point of that offense, and Boston plays at a pretty fast pace. So I just wanted to mention those guys for tournaments, but I think I'm focusing on, some of the other ones for cash games. Do we have anything else to say at the shooting guard position? Anyone?
I think Iman Shumpert could come and play if Love sits. Obviously, he's bare minimum on FanDuel at 3,500. And last game that Love said he played 32 minutes. He only scored 2 real life points, but had 4 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals for 20 plus FanDuel points. And then Denver's going to turn the ball over, that. So he could fill up around the peripheral stats. So I like him as a cheap punt play for tournaments.
Yeah, and I think J.R. Smith is in that same breath. I always like to mention him because people forget about that, but his usage cranks up pretty high. And you look at Denver, and the matchup kind of works for him. I mean, Denver allows the 4th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. So J.R. Smith, a launcher, you get one of the main focal points of the offense out, and look at that price on DraftKings. I mean, 4,400. It's hard for me to imagine without Kevin Love against this pretty crappy defense against opposing front courts that J.R. Smith doesn't hit value at that price.
He's going to be low owned too. Yeah, what were you saying, Nick?
He's down to 4,000 on FanDuel too. So
yeah, I was just going to mention 3 of his last 4 games he has 10 or less fantasy points too. So that ownership percentage is going to be way down, and he's had some tough matchups too. Miami decent defensively. I think Oladipo guarded him for Orlando, and then he had Utah before that. He had a good game in between with Dallas, so those difficult matchups are could explain why he's had poor outputs in the last few games. So that low ownership and that price, 4,000 on FanDuel, might be worth targeting. I agree with you guys there.
Yeah.
Oh, and Ricky, I want to ask you about this guy.
Sure.
Tim Hardaway Jr. What's up with his rotation? I know he's playing a lot more minutes lately, and he's been crushing on fantasy points wise. So what's up with that rotation? Do you know?
Yeah, it's pretty much. Say that again, Josh.
Was it Bazemore's injury essentially?
Yeah, and they're kind of giving up in a sense on Korver. I mean,
that's what I figured.
Yeah, I mean, Korver's had, he's one of those guys who, based on his ridiculous shooting, and he was cold, at least by his standards, for a long period this year. So we're talking, at least 20 minutes in 3 of his last 4 games for Hardaway. He's gone back-to-back games with 20 points. And, if they're getting out of him what Korver was supposed to give him, then for them it's, it's no harm, no foul. They just switched the guy in the personnel. It's basically a one-for-one swap. So if Hardaway's getting it done, yeah, I think he's definitely a good, solid tournament option still. I mentioned on Twitter today that Atlanta is actually top 10 in pace. You wouldn't think so, but they're ahead of Oklahoma City, so they play at a decent pace. And a shooter like Hardaway, and you would think a shooter like Korver would flourish in that rotation. But we also should mention that Hardaway shot at least 45 and a half. Or 54, excuse me, I'm dyslexic, 54.5% in the last 2 games. So, for a shooter, it's difficult to keep that up. Let's move on to small forward. I think this one is pretty easy if Kevin Love sits. I mean, LeBron James has got to lead the bunch, but there are a lot of other interesting options, and I think I'm going to state tonight that you do not want to spend down at small forward. I really, really like the guys atop of it, and I want to see if you guys agree with me. Nick, what do you think at small forward?
Yeah, I totally agree. There's just nothing down low that I want to use. I mean, Mirotic caught my eye if Gasol's going to play, it sounds like, so I'm just not going to touch Mirotic at all. I'm looking at Paul George as my favorite one, though. Just if this game can stay close, I think he could flirt with 60 FanDuel points with ease. I mean, he went 57.1 against him their previous matchup this season, so this is just a great spot for Paul George. So the Sixers should be tired. They just don't play much defense. I mean, he's killing it right now. They're fighting for a playoff spot at the bottom of the East, so I love Paul George. He's my favorite small forward play, but if Love sits out, I think it's going to be real tough not to use LeBron and Paul George together for me.
Yeah, I love Paul George tonight. When you guys were talking about, the Ellises and the Hills, I certainly understood it, but, the reason I wasn't mentioning them is I think Paul George is the play on that team. Not that there can't be multiple plays against a pretty bad defense, but I'm with you on Paul George. I think he's going to be my bold call tonight if you don't take it first. I think it was 61 DraftKings points the last time. I know it wasn't since November, but Paul George's DraftKings points per game have been trending up since the beginning of the year. Actually, since December, they've been going up and up and up. He's at 46 this month, and now he faces a great matchup. Benny, what do you like at small forward tonight? Are those your guys, or do you even have other names?
Yeah, I am not on LeBron James, even if Kevin Love doesn't play. I think the boost usually goes more to Kyrie Irving, and LeBron's going to basically give you what LeBron always gives you, like 45, 50 fantasy points somewhere in there, and I don't think there's a lot of upside to it, to be honest with you. But I do love the Paul George call. He's somebody I'm on. I don't think him and Monta Ellis have to be mutually exclusive either. I think you can play them both. I have them both in a lot of lineups, so I'm hoping you can play them both tonight and it works out. But there's two other guys that you guys didn't mention I want to talk about. Tobias Harris, especially for cash games, has been about as consistent as they come right now. He's giving you around like 28 to 35 fantasy points every time he goes out there. I think he's 6K over on FanDuel, which is a really nice price for him. A little more pricey on DraftKings. He's 6,200, and you need a little bit of a higher multiplier over there. But on FanDuel, I really like Tobias Harris. And then the cheap guy that I've been talking about, and again, I might be the only one on him, but 4,200 for Harrison Barnes over on DraftKings, to me, is like an absolute steal. We talked about already how we think that this might be a game where both teams get forced to go. Well, I mean, Golden State's going to try to go small, and that's going to kind of force Minnesota to go small as well. So I think that at 4,200 for Harrison Barnes, you could get 25 to 35 fantasy points out of him, especially with no Iguodala. And even if the game does turn into a blowout, he's like the one guy that probably will still see some minutes in the fourth quarter anyway because, again, Iguodala's not there, and he's a young guy, so they don't mind rolling him out there for an extra couple minutes. So I think the only viable cheap option, I agree with you guys, you probably want to spend up. If you're going cheap, though, I think Harrison Barnes is definitely somebody that's in play.
Yeah, and Nick, I was looking at the minutes distribution for the Hawks because I do think an Atlanta wing is going to be viable against a Washington team that struggles against both shooting guards and small forwards. But I mean, you look at Bazemore and Korver for the year; they're averaging 28 and 30 minutes. But this month, they're down to 23. Wait, no, that's. It was I just lost it, but it was 24 and 28 minutes per game. So both of them are pretty far down, with Hardaway pretty much being the difference there. So they have had a shift in the rotation. I mean, they've had Schroeder and Humphreys and all kinds of guys off the bench playing big minutes, and they only have Horford and Millsap averaging over 30. So the Hawks are a difficult team to trust, but I guess if you're going to trust someone, you might as well trust the cheaper players on the rise as opposed to the veterans whose costs are probably too high. But I think it's small forward if you're saving Otto Porter. We mentioned it earlier, especially if Beal doesn't play. I think it's a difficult matchup for Wall as a point guard, so I think someone else is going to have to step up, and Otto Porter's been getting it done. He's been in the basically mid-teens of scoring, and he gives you threes. He gives you steals, so I think he's kind of a nice play. Who haven't I got to? Josh, what do you got for us at small forward?
Well, yeah, you guys basically covered it with James and Paul George. I think they're going to be, if not one, definitely both in all three or all four of our lineups. But I do think that tonight, if you are looking to go contrarian, which fading George and James or George and or James would be the way to do that, I think Evan Turner is not a bad option tonight. And it's funny because I just saw the Knicks are going to go big odds for him in free agency. So congratulations, Knicks fans. But basically, I like Turner tonight because he could fill in again as a starter for Jay Crowder. And in the last game against Philadelphia, he played 35 minutes. Before that, he played 31. He had to give him 20, but then he had 27, 30, and then 31 minutes. So his minutes are up. He has a good matchup, probably against Evan Fournier, who's likely to defend him. And the one thing about Evan Turner is, although he can't necessarily score 20 or more real points every night, he can get you rebounds, he can get you assists, maybe some blocks and steals thrown in there because of his length on the defensive side of the floor. So I think he's an interesting option in tournaments as a pivot, but I can't trust him in cash games, especially because I think a lot of lineups tonight are going to have James and George. So if you don't have one or the other in cash, you could be trying to play catch up the rest of the night.
I love James and George. I don't want to sell either of them short, but what about Kawhi Leonard? I mean, you look at this Spurs team, and this is the stat that really caught my eye yesterday, is this month, I think they've played 9 or 10 games. This is their scoring distribution on the Spurs. 24 points per game for LaMarcus Aldridge, 23.5 for Kawhi Leonard, and then their next highest scorer is Patty Mills at 9.3 points per game. So they've got two guys over 10 points. They're both in the mid-20s, and they're basically the focal point of the whole offense. I mean, you look at Charlotte, nothing really scares me for either of their matchups. If you're paying down just slightly, I think Kawhi Leonard's got to at least factor into pretty much all conversations, that being tournaments and cash games, because he's got that safe floor. He pretty much puts up statistics across the board: rebounds, the blocks, the steals, and clearly they're focusing on just two guys. So I mean, you don't think of it, but the Spurs this month are kind of like the Cavaliers without Kevin Love. Anyone want to comment on that?
And if you look at the Hornets' defensive efficiency against positions too, their two worst positions are small forward and power forward. So I love Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard if you're looking to go a little contrarian. I don't think a lot of people are going to be on Spurs with this low total. So I think both of those are great plays, honestly.
Yeah, I like Kawhi Leonard a lot tonight. And the other thing too is if you look at Charlotte's recent games, they've been playing games in the 115s, the 120s. They've been putting up a lot of points, so they're playing pretty fast right now. And the reason I like Kawhi a little more than I like LaMarcus Aldridge is Kawhi's kind of contributing across the board. He gives you the rebounds, he gets you some defensive stats, he gets you some assists. Aldridge isn't really even rebounding all that great in some of his recent games, and he doesn't give you anything really in the assist or in the defensive stat category. So if I had to choose between those two, it would be Kawhi. But again, we talked about this last week. They're the two guys that are taking all the shots for the Spurs. So if you're looking at anybody, that's where you got to start looking with that Spurs team. I think both of those guys are going to score over 20 real-life points tonight. So they're definitely both viable, and they're definitely both in play.
Yeah, I'm getting to the point with the Spurs where I won't consider anyone under any circumstances, besides maybe against the Cavs, because I feel good about that I won't use any of them in cash, besides Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard. There's just no reason to. They'll sit. They're inconsistent. They're not scoring. And even in tournaments, I'm just kind of backing away from them and saying, if it's not Aldridge, it's not Leonard, then I'm really not that interested. Is that kind of your feeling towards them as well? Josh, why don't we go to you?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of playing Spurs basically at all season long because of the fact that their minutes are limited until the playoffs. But like you said, that's an interesting stat. 9.3 points per game for Patty Mills, and then on top of that is nearly 3 times that amount for Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge. So I think those two are safe because it's clear that those are the two carrying the torch probably throughout this year, the playoffs, and the next few years. So I think those are the two guys you can look at. I'm just not sure I can trust either one of them in cash either, like you said, because the Spurs can still blow out a lot of teams.
Yeah, I just want to mention that Aldridge's minutes are also up this month, and he's averaging 41.1 DraftKings points per game. That's 24 points per game, 9 rebounds, over 1 block, and almost 1 steal. So all of a sudden, I mean, they're really focusing on him as their top offensive guy. So I think you can. Let's go to power forward because I think a lot of people are going to be on Cousins as they rightfully should. A lot of people are going to be on Draymond Green. We'll get to you guys explaining why. But I think for cash, LaMarcus Aldridge makes a lot of sense to me. In a perfect world, I'd love to go Aldridge and Green. But like you mentioned, Charlotte's defensive weaknesses are at the spots where the Spurs are going to hit them. Aldridge has just been great this month. It looks like they're finally committing to him. I think it's one of those things in the rotation where he just needed some time to adjust. And now that he's pretty much adjusted, I don't want to say to his role in Portland, but he's pretty much figured out, how to coexist with Tim Duncan and be one of the best post guys in the NBA. That now it's back to being little Marcus Aldridge that we all know and love. So I'm way on him tonight. His price is a little up, but I think he's worth it. Josh, why don't we start with you in terms of power forwards? Who are you going with tonight?
I do like Aldridge as well. He's my top guy for tournaments. But the guy I'm looking at for cash is a guy that I've targeted a lot this year, and that's Paul Millsap. He's very consistent. He does a lot of things very well. The Wizards aren't necessarily a top-tier DVP matchup, but in a fast-paced game, Millsap is a little bit of an undersized big, so he does get a chance to play in those fast-paced games. I think a double-double is a lock for him tonight. And I was looking at his efficiency numbers this season. He's averaging 1.15 fantasy points per minute. And for those of you that use that, that's more than Karl Anthony Towns, Damian Lillard, and Paul George. So this guy's been very, very good. He plays 33 minutes a game, and if those minutes go up anymore, he's looking at a chance to score 40 or more fantasy points. And for me, considering you're getting him at a discount of about $1,000 from those other guys, he's worth using in cash games tonight.
Nick, are you on board with Aldridge in cash, or are you going in a different direction?
I think this is a spot where I'm probably going to pay down a little bit and just go a tier below Aldridge on FanDuel. I love Alex Len tonight. I just think Devin Booker is going to get locked up by Tony Allen, and that'll free up Alex Len for more shots. And he admitted he's been taking bad shots today, and he quoted that next game against the Grizzlies is going to be different. And he dropped 19 and 16 on the Grizzlies earlier this month for 50.2 FanDuel points. I just think he's been playing terrible lately. Nobody's going to be on him. I think you're probably going to get him at less than 5% ownership on FanDuel probably, and I think he's a great tournament play. He's going to be the focal point of the offense. I know Randolph and those guys are back, but they're not defenders or anything like that. That scare me I get for Len. So I love Alex Len tonight, power forward on FanDuel.
Yeah, I forgot he's a power forward on FanDuel, so I didn't even have him on my list here. But I definitely have him on my center list because you're right. If Booker gets shut down, then someone else is going to have to pick up his slack, and Alex Len has been great. People are going to tend to forget that because of a few bad ones, but I still think this is a young player they're looking to develop at the end of the season, so he should continue to get his. He'll bounce back. Benny, who do you like at power forward tonight?
Well, if you're playing on DraftKings, I think you got to look at the Marcus Cousins in that matchup against, Chicago. I'm sure we'll talk about him at center because he's center at other spots. So I'll hold off on the Cousins talk for now. I didn't hear anybody mention Zach Randolph, and I think that's a mistake. He's 6,700 over on DraftKings, and he just came back last game. Now, I don't expect him to do what he did last game. I mean, he put up like 28, 10, and 9 or something ridiculous like that.
He triple-doubled, amazingly.
Yeah, like in his first game back. But I do think that it illustrates a point of how weak the front court is for Memphis right now. I mean, remember, when he was out, JaMychal Green was putting up those kind of numbers. And it's not because JaMychal Green's a great player. It was because JaMychal Green's playing as many minutes as he can handle because he was the only guy they had there. So with Zebo back, he's going to get a ton of minutes. He's going to be able to put up some fantasy points. 6,700 is pretty cheap for him. I definitely think he can get us to 40 tonight. Again, it's a good matchup against Phoenix. It's going to be a high pace. Phoenix isn't all that great against big guys. I don't expect to see another 30 rebound game out of Tyson Chandler or whatever he did last game when he went nuts. Alex Len hasn't been playing great. I like Zach Randolph a lot in this spot. Like I said, I don't expect him to go with triple-double again, but I do think he'll have a pretty good game. And then a cheap guy that we haven't talked about is also Channing Frye. Without Kevin Love, the last time Love missed, Frye put up like 30, 35 fantasy points in that game. I like him more than I like Tristan Thompson because I think that, he does more of the things that Love can do. And I also don't think that they still love Mozgov to go with the Mozgov-Tristan Thompson pairing. I think you're going to see a lot more of Channing Frye in there at the 4, stretched out in the corner with, Tristan Thompson down low. Because when they have Tristan Thompson and Mozgov in the game together, it just kind of clogs up the lane. And that's not really what they want to do with that team when they have Kyrie and LeBron.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one name I think we absolutely have to get to is Draymond Green. I think this is not only a great spot, I think this is the prime spot that you want to use Draymond Green tonight. Not only is the pace going to be crazy, but you look at the minutes per game with Bogut and Ezeli versus without. And I know it's a small sample, but I mean, Green's minutes are up from 34.3 to 38.5 without the two of them. So, instead of being able to switch center with center and then go with their small lineup for short periods of time, Green kind of has to play in the big lineups with, playing power forward and the small lineups where he plays center. I mean, he's playing for a majority of the game. Now we're talking about Draymond Green playing Jimmy Butler minutes and Jimmy Butler playing Draymond Green minutes. So they've kind of switched roles and their prices are pretty similar. And because of it, Green's DraftKings points per game is up to almost 44 per game in that new role. And you look at his price on Fantasy Draft and on DraftKings, and he is in the top 10 of fantasy points per dollar. And now you factor in this 233 total against a team where he's going to have to be in there matching up, we speculated against Towns, against Jang, against everyone. I mean, we could be talking about 40 minutes in a game where 240 points are scored. And Draymond Green may have to play some point guard with Iguodala out. Now we're talking about a game where I think Draymond Green could triple-double. I mean, I think he is the prime target in cash games because I think his floor is a lot higher than LaMarcus Aldridge's. I mean, we mentioned that Aldridge doesn't do a whole lot. Well, how about Draymond Green basically averaging a triple-double this month? I mean, at least getting close, and that's kind of the usual with him, with the blocks, with the steals. I have a hard time not considering Draymond Green in any format tonight. I think he is just an absolute beast. Anyone have anything else to say at power forward tonight?
Yeah, I want to touch on Nick. Go ahead first.
All right. I think Darrell Arthur is a borderline must-play.
Boom, there you
tonight,
go.
Especially with. Was that what you were going to say?
No, go ahead. Perfect. This is exactly what I had.
All right. Yeah. I just without Fareed in lineup, I think he's going to start again, and then I know it's hard to trust Nuggets bigs because you don't know what Malone's going to do, but either if Love starts or Fry starts, Arthur is the guy that matches up better with him because Nurkic and Laverne aren't going to stretch the floor. They're not going to come out and guard the arc against Fry or Love. So Arthur's going to play 30-plus minutes, I think, and could easily 8-9x on FanDuel after 700.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there because when you look at the Nuggets, like you said, it's hard to trust their bigs. But in fast-paced games, they usually play Arthur a lot with Fareed. Now, without Fareed, this guy just plays a ton of minutes. Looking at this season as an entire sample size, Arthur has 23 fantasy points per game without Fareed. 3 of 9 of those games, he has over 34 fantasy points. That's a huge number. And like Nick said, he could be going against Channing Frye, who we all know is not remotely close to a good defender. Also, like he said, with Fry playing away from the basket, they're going to need somebody with length out there to defend him, and that's exactly what Darrell Arthur is. So I think in a slate with all these studs you're going to have to pay for, going down to Arthur in one of your spots on FanDuel, especially at power forward, is going to be an excellent way to go.
There you go.
I think last time we were.
Go ahead.
I think last time me and Collacchi both agreed on Arthur. I think he exploded, if I remember correctly. So it's good. It's good vibes here now.
There you
good
go.
Good vibes all the time.
We're feeling the good vibrations here on Darrell Arthur.
Too far, Ricky.
Why? The Beach Boys reference is too far?
Well, all I could think of was 2K and frequency vibrations, so you can just go on, whatever.
Oh, your mind's in the gutter, Kalachi. Get it out of there. I was going Beach Boys. Let's go to center. I'm going to start with the guy who you guys probably aren't going to mention with Maurice Spates and just talk about why I think he's viable in tournaments. I think last game we talked about it. Both teams decided not to use centers hardly at all. Against the team that basically starts two centers, he's going to certainly be more necessary. And this is a guy who's been lighting it up recently. He had a 25-9 performance. I think it was last week. He's been scoring in the mid-teens every game besides basically the game against the Spurs, which was an elite defense. He barely played. All he needs is 15 minutes in order to crush value. And I think he gets that in this one. I think there's a nice little pace in this one, obviously, according to Vegas. So I like Spates, but he's kind of a tournament-only guy for me. Benny, why don't you lead us off for this one? Who do you like at center?
Yeah, I am paying up for Karl Anthony Towns in a couple spots. I do think that with 232 points in this game, I do think that he's going to be a tough guard for everybody but Draymond, and I don't think they're going to try to use Draymond on him too much. So I think he'll still be able to put up some points. Andre Drummond's not in a horrible spot against Milwaukee. He's going up against Greg Monroe defense. We know that he basically dominated them in the last game. I think he had 52 fantasy points. Didn't play great the first matchup. I think this is their third matchup this year. The first matchup, he didn't play great against them. I think he only had like 35 fantasy points. But I'd be looking for Drummond to have a pretty good game here against a combination of like Monroe and Plumlee and maybe some John Henson defense as well. And then the last guy that I was looking at was Jan Mahimi, who I don't think anybody's going to be on tonight. Remember, going up against Philadelphia, center spot is a great matchup for Philly, especially without Okafor in there. We've been seeing centers put up just humongous rebounding numbers against them. He can get some block shots, he can score a few points, and I really don't think anyone's going to be on him. So as far as cheap options go, I like Mahimi as well, but I do think I'm going to be paying up for either Towns or Drummond in most spots tonight.
There's a little bit of news. Kalachi, I know you mentioned him earlier. Evan Turner will start again tonight. I know the first game they experimented with Marcus Smart in the starting lineup. It looks like they're going to keep going with Turner, who actually had a nice game last game. Nick, who do you like at center tonight? I would assume on FanDuel, Boogie Cousins got to be in the consideration.
Yeah, I got 5 guys on my radar on FanDuel, and it's Boogie, Karl Anthony Towns, Andre Drummond, Greg Monroe, and then Jan Mahimi, like Benny just talked about. With Karl Anthony Towns, I think you really need to consider paying up for him. I know we're talking about paying up for a lot of guys, but he needs to be in conversation. He can run the floor. He's shown he can actually handle the ball a little bit too. So I don't think he's going to lose too many minutes in this if the Warriors go small. So I think he's a great play no matter what in this spot with this huge total. And then Mahimi, I love him too. Like Benny talked about, the Sixers give up a ton of rebounds. I think this gives me a chance to talk about Miles Turner, who I didn't talk about at power forward as well. I think Miles Turner is a great play. I think is he still center on DraftKings? I'm not sure. Anyone?
Yeah, I think he is.
Yeah, so I think he's in a great spot too. He's at 4,900 on FanDuel. He's the one big on the Pacers that is blowout proof too. And the Pacers got blown out by the Hawks, I think, last week. And he stayed in the game in the whole fourth quarter, and so he's going to get his minutes tonight.
Yeah, and the chat just actually mentioned a guy who I realized I have on my sheet, and we went over at power forward. So just backtracking a second, Amir Johnson, minutes been in the low to mid-20s. I mean, you look at the games, 23, 25, 26, 24, and he's gone over 30 DraftKings points in 2 of the last 3. So I actually think he's viable. I know, Solinger played big minutes last night, and they're on a back-to-back, so they don't typically run him out there for much on the second night. I actually think Amir Johnson plays, I think he gets close to that 26-minute, 27-minute yet again that he was on the 18th, so I think he's viable. But let's keep going with center. Who have I not gotten to yet? Kalachi, is it on you with center? Who do you like?
Yeah, I think it starts with Cousins, but as we've discussed, there are a lot of players at high salaries tonight, so I don't think we really need to talk about him too much against Chicago, who really struggles against bigs. I also like Drummond as well, with that elite history he has against the Bucks. We're talking about over 40 DraftKings points in all 3 games. He put up a 60-burger, I believe, in the second game against the Bucks as well. He's under 8,000 on some sites as well, which is something I definitely want to target. And, of course, on Fantasy Draft, he always seems to be underpriced because of the way that the pricing algorithm goes. I think it's just 13.8, which puts him at 3 times value. There would be roughly 41 fantasy points, which I definitely think is in reach given the scoring there. Also, like Marcin Gortat at center tonight on FanDuel. He's just 6,200. I know his price has come down, but that was due to 3 or 4 games where he definitely underperforms. But in those games, he had foul trouble. He ran into some minutes issues. And I think against Atlanta, who's 25th against the opposing centers, and with his price down, I think he's definitely an option to consider.
Yeah, and we've mentioned a lot of high-priced guys. I actually think that was a good point, whoever brought that up. I think it was Nick. So maybe we should go over, maybe our 2 favorite guys that we're paying up for tonight and our favorite value play in order to fit them. I think that will probably help people instead of just throwing names out there. And I'll go ahead and start it so you guys have a second to look at it. I think I'm going to focus on fantasy draft and DraftKings, and I think if I could have 2 guys in my lineup, they would be Draymond Green and DeMarcus Cousins. I really didn't go into Cousins, but that matchup against the Bulls, I mean, they struggle against centers. Even when they have Gasol healthy, they don't. He's probably out tonight, is what it sounds like. So they've got a bunch of undersized guys against Cousins, and they allow a ton of rebounds. So, DeMarcus Cousins went 20-20 last night, could again. And I know Nick doesn't like it, but I think my favorite punt's Ray McCallum. That awful Suns defense, I don't think he's going to need to do much in order to hit value. Benny, why don't you go with your 2 favorites and then 1 punt?
Yeah, I'm looking over some of my teams right now, and 2 guys that I paid up a lot for are Paul George and Draymond Green. So I think both of them are reasonably priced for stars. They're not the 10K guys. You can usually get them a little bit cheaper, and I think both are in good spots to have, just monster games tonight. And I talked about him before. The guy who I like the most as my, salary saver tonight is going to be Harrison Barnes. It's a big total game there. His price is way too cheap. He's getting a nice roll. He's picking up minutes without Iguodala. He'll play. I think he's matchup proof, game flow proof, I should say, whether it stays close or whether it turns into a blowout. I still think we're going to see a lot of minutes for him on the floor.
Nick, what about you? If you had 2 and 1, which way are you going?
Yeah, it's really close between Steph, Paul George, and Cousins for me, but I think I'd go Steph Curry and Paul George as my 2 guys I want to lock in, and then Darrell Arthur is my obvious salary saver spot. I think Collacchi might agree with me on that one.
Yeah, Collacchi, who you like at 2 and 1?
Yeah, my definite value play tonight is Darrell Arthur, like Nick just said, and I think my 2 guys to pay up for are Paul George and Steph Curry. So I think we agree basically on all of that, Nick. I did want to mention real quick, though, before we get into bold calls, I think Minnesota and Golden State have only played 1 time this year. Is that right?
It is correct.
In that game, guys, it was 129 to 116. That was with Bogut. That was with Ezeli. That was with Garnett and Tayshaun Prince playing. Draymond Green had 23, 8, and 12. Karl Anthony Towns had 17 and 11 and only played 30 minutes. There's just going to be a ton of points in this game. And that was a game in that first one, which you just mentioned, at 243 points. That was with those bigs. So this game could just be absurd, and I can't wait for it.
That's a great segue to bold calls because I think at least one of us, me, will be on that game, and I'll start it out. I'll go Draymond Green, gonna triple double. He's gonna score 65 fantasy points, and I think he's gonna score the most fantasy points of anyone in this game, which includes Curry. And I actually think he's gonna score more fantasy points than LeBron James, who a lot more people are gonna be on. So that's my bold call for tonight. Let's go to you. It looks like you got one, Benny. What are you doing tonight? What do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, I keep beating a dead horse at this point, but I'm telling you guys, don't sleep on Harrison Barnes. He's going to get 30 fantasy points tonight. It's going to be 7x value. He's going to slide nicely right into that roster, and he's going to give you the money you need to pay up for everybody else.
I think
getting arrested.
Yeah.
So you said Harrison Barnes and started getting.
He's so cheap. It's such a steal. It's such a steal that the cops are coming to take me right now. So tell me guys about that.
That is too perfect. Benny gonna be.
Harrison Barnes. Woo!
Excuse me, Mr. Ricciardi. You've been arrested for shoplifting Barnes at that price. Come with us. Anyways, Nick, let's go with you. What do you got for us tonight?
Let's go Alex Len with 40-plus FanDuel points tonight. I don't think anyone's going to be on tonight. I think he's a GPP winner tonight.
Very nice. Alex Len, I really like that game. I'm going to adjust my lineups. I want to have some solid shares to that one, especially against the Suns. But Alex Len against their bigs is a pretty nice one, too. Collacchi, what do you got for us?
Well, I think my first bold call is that Benny will get arrested tonight. My second bold call is going to be, I think Andre Drummond is the highest scoring center tonight, even over DeMarcus Cousins.
Wow. Andre Drummond, the highest scoring center. You do know that DeMarcus Cousins is playing my lowly Bulls, right? You are aware of that?
Yeah. I think Pau Gasol turns into the dream Elijah won tonight, I guess, right?
That would be if he plays. Otherwise, he's going to have to be more like, have you ever seen the movie The Sixth Man where the guy's dead and he still is haunting the people? It's going to be the ghost of Pau Gasol on the court. But it is exactly an hour of this show. You're probably sick of us, so we're going to get out of here. Again, don't forget to check out the free roll, rotocurve.com/free roll. Check out the NBA tools, and good luck tonight at what should be a crazy slate.
Yeah, guys, real quick, I just wanted to say let's win a GPP so we can bail Benny out. What do you think?
Yeah. You only have to pay 10% of bail, so if he's 100,000.
Hey guys, listen. I have 3 kids at home. If I get arrested, leave me a night in jail for a little bit of Save the money. Take me out for a beer when I get out the next day. Leave me in jail. We're good that way.
Oh, there you go. Benny's going to be in a cell with Ted the arsonist, and it's actually going to be peaceful for him. Oh, until next time, we're out.